This story takes place during the early days of my marriage. Shortly after my wife and I tied the knot, my beloved grandfather passed away, leaving me a substantial inheritance. Along with the inheritance came a heartfelt note advising me to use the funds wisely to establish a good life for my wife and me. Meanwhile, my father-in-law, who happens to own a real estate company specializing in purchasing and renovating foreclosed houses, informed us about an ideal starter home. He generously offered to cover the cost of rehabilitating the house, with the expectation that we would repay him once we were more financially stable or within 2 years if we decided to sell the house. Excited about this opportunity, we purchased the house and patiently waited for the renovations to be completed before moving in, a process that took approximately 90 days. After settling into our new home for about 2 weeks, an unexpected visitor arrived at our doorstep claiming to be the president of the Homeowners Association, HOA. They inquired about my landlord's contact information, assuming we were mere renters. Politely, I clarified that we were the proud homeowners, only to be further questioned about my parents. Reiterating that I was the legitimate owner, I asked them the purpose of their visit. The individual explained that there was an HOA governing our neighborhood and that I needed to sign the HOA rules. They also informed me that I owed $90 in prorated dues, but generously offered a 30-day grace period for payment. However, they insisted that I sign the rules immediately. Cautiously, I requested to review the regulations first before committing to anything. Strangely, they became quite insistent about immediate signing. Sensing their pushiness, I firmly declined, emphasizing my intention to read and understand the rules thoroughly before making any agreements. They reluctantly granted me a 7-day window to sign the documents, reminding me that failing to comply would result in legal fines. Feeling unsure about how to navigate this new experience with HOAs, I reached out to my in-laws for guidance. I explained the situation and asked for their advice. My father-in-law expressed his frustration, stating that the existence of an HOA should have been disclosed prior to the house sale. He mentioned that sometimes such details are overlooked, particularly with HUD houses. Nevertheless, we acknowledged that the $30 monthly fee wasn't exorbitant considering the amenities provided, such as a delightful neighborhood playground. With their reassurance, I eventually agreed to sign the rules, despite finding a few of them rather excessive. At the time, I felt compelled to comply, believing I had no other viable choice. For a while, things seemed relatively uneventful. Around a month later, my wife and I decided to host a small housewarming party for a few close friends. As the evening progressed, our intimate gathering, comprising only 8 people, including us, took place on our cozy deck. We had set up a modest fire pit, a thoughtful gift from one of our friends, and were enjoying the evening when an abrupt, pounding knock startled me. It sounded like a police officer demanding entry. Intrigued and slightly concerned, I hurriedly went to investigate, only to find the HOA president parked in front of our house, their car equipped with a yellow police light on top. To my astonishment, the HOA president, with an air of sternness, informed me that I had violated the HOA rules by hosting a party beyond the approved hours of 10 p.m. It was now 5 p.m. according to my watch. I found this enforcement incredibly strict, but decided to comply nonetheless. Reluctantly, we moved the gathering inside. The very next day, I received an official warning from the HOA, accusing me of throwing a wild bonfire that posed a safety hazard due to drinking, which was entirely false as I hadn't consumed any alcohol. Brushing it off, I dismissed the incident as insignificant. Fast forward 6 to 9 months later, we organized a teen group devotional one afternoon and decided to play a friendly game of football on our rarely trafficked connecting street. Only 2 houses, ours and the family across from us, existed on this road. The children from both households joined in the game. Suddenly, a police siren blared, accompanied by flashing yellow lights. It was the HOA president insisting that we immediately discontinue our activities due to safety concerns, claiming that a child could be run over. Frustrated with his constant interference, I retorted that we had been vigilant, watching for cars, and he was the first vehicle we had seen during the hour-long game. Despite my objections, he persisted, raising the issue of emergency vehicles potentially needing access to our street. This argument seemed baseless since both of our connecting streets had entrances from the main road. Reluctantly, I yielded to his demands and we retreated indoors. The following day, I received a letter stating that I was being fined the maximum amount of $60 for the first offense, with an option to protest the fine at the next HOA meeting. However, I noticed that the fine was due in 30 days, while the next meeting was scheduled for 35 days later. Determined to contest the fine, I chose not to pay until after the hearing. I promptly replied to the HOA president, notifying him of my decision. When the meeting arrived, I found myself facing an assembly consisting of the HOA president, his wife who served as the HOA secretary, the vice president, who happened to be the president's neighbor, and the treasurer, the vice president's wife. My protest was swiftly dismissed, and to add insult to injury, I was charged an additional $30 late fee for not paying on time, despite having informed the HOA president beforehand. Fed up with the relentless enforcement, I realized I had reached my breaking point but felt powerless to take any significant action. About 4 to 5 months later, my wife and I joyously welcomed our first child into the world. One night, upon returning home from my second job in retail, my military buddy called to congratulate me. Not wanting to disturb my peacefully sleeping newborn daughter, I opted to remain in my car with the engine running, as the night air was slightly chilly. I sat in my car for around half an hour, enjoying a moment of peace when, suddenly, I heard a blaring police siren and saw the flashing yellow lights. It was right in front of my house, and the noise was anything but subtle. The intrusive light even managed to seep into my daughter's bedroom. Irritated, I stepped out of the car and rather brusquely requested the officer to turn off the light to avoid waking my daughter. His response was perplexing. He claimed I appeared suspicious sitting in my car with the engine running outside my own home. I proceeded to explain the situation, but he remained dismissive, stating that my troublemaker history wouldn't grant me any leniency. At that point, frustration got the better of me, and I expressed my dissatisfaction with his attitude. I even told him exactly what I thought of his behavior. Refusing to back down, I sat on the hood of my car. He lingered for another 15 minutes, persistently urging me to go inside. At one point, he even touched my shoulder, which prompted me to warn him that any further physical contact would be seen as aggression, and I would defend myself. In response, he eventually retreated, got into his car, and left. He circled the block about 4 times in the next 30 minutes, but the cold weather finally forced me to seek refuge inside my home. The following day, I received a hand-delivered letter from the HOA president and the vice president. The HOA president requested that I step outside to discuss last night's incident. He claimed he had shown me leniency by refraining from involving the police after I had supposedly threatened him. Cutting him off, I firmly demanded that he leave my property or face potential trespassing charges. Reading the letter, I discovered that he was imposing 2 separate fines, each amounting to $180, the maximum allowable penalty. One fine was for violating the curfew, and the other was for disobeying the night watchman. I had simply had enough. I had reached my breaking point. This is where my quest for justice began. Motivated by a sense of injustice and abuse, I delved into the laws and regulations governing HOAs and their fines. I soon unearthed a crucial detail. According to the law, homeowners must be notified of an HOA 10 days prior to closing on a house, and they must receive the HOA rules within 45 days of the purchase. Failure to comply with these requirements means homeowners cannot be compelled to participate in the HOA. Recalling our experience, I realized we were not served with the rules until after we had already moved in, which was close to 90 days after our closing. Taking action, I contacted my real estate agent, who happens to be a trusted family friend. She had facilitated countless home purchases for my in-laws over the past 35 years and was well versed in the intricacies of the process. I asked her if she still had the necessary paperwork, and she assured me that she could provide a copy. Upon examination, we discovered that we had been notified over 90 days after the purchase, with no disclosure statement provided at the closing. My realtor expressed her surprise, acknowledging that it was legally required to provide the disclosure statement before the sale. Such documentation is typically received during a title inspection to determine whether or not there is a registered HOA. After conducting further research, she called me back 2 days later with astonishing news. Our neighborhood was not registered with the city or county as an HOA, a requirement by law. I decided to take action and call the county office responsible for HOA registrations. Upon providing them with the name of our neighborhood, they informed me that our neighborhood was actually registered in a different city, not our own. They explained that if we wished to establish an HOA, we would need to follow specific procedures, without which the HOA would lack the authority to collect any fees or exert control. It turned out that our neighborhood had initially been within one city's jurisdiction, but when the city lines changed, our neighborhood became divided. The other portion of the neighborhood retained the registered HOA, while our HOA president was supposed to register with the state but chose not to comply with the required steps. Initially, my impulse was to storm over to the president's house and confront him directly. However, I decided to approach the situation more tactfully. I spoke with my neighbor across the street, who also harbored disdain for the HOA, and shared the information I had discovered. He, too, was incensed by the revelation. Together, we engaged with a few more neighbors, forming a group of around 10 individuals who were united in their conviction to attend the upcoming HOA meeting. Word quickly spread, resulting in an unexpectedly large turnout that exceeded the capacity of the library meeting room where the meeting was held. I specifically requested to speak on behalf of the group, and they graciously granted me the opportunity. However, the president attempted to silence me, citing my outstanding fine. By that point, I was approximately 3 weeks behind on my payments, with a $30 weekly penalty per fine. Consequently, my current bill amounted to roughly $540. Despite his objections, I proceeded with my address. I explained to them that I had sought legal advice from my in-laws' attorney, also a trusted family friend who had prepared a lawsuit asserting that they were masquerading as a registered HOA in order to collect money from us, constituting fraud. The president dismissed my claims, suggesting that I had no understanding of the situation and that he had grown weary of my antics. The staff members promptly left, while the rest of us remained to discuss the matter further. A month later, myself and 20 other homeowners formally served them with a lawsuit. We sought reimbursement for all fines and HOA dues we had paid, totaling approximately $50,000. Some families had been residents for over a decade, accumulating significant amounts. The president and vice president enlisted their own attorney, who attempted to legitimize the HOA. However, in order to achieve legitimacy, they needed the signatures of approximately 90% of the homeowners. Regrettably for them, they managed to secure only 3 signatures, including their own and that of another individual. This failed attempt prompted them to propose a settlement, the abolition of the HOA. They claimed that the funds collected had been utilized for park maintenance, snow removal, and other neighborhood events without any personal financial gain. We took a vote, and this was turned down in overwhelming fashion. I was surprised I actually voted to accept this. Then, about a week later, one of the other families called and mentioned something about the park maintenance and snow removal. Apparently, he had given a quote to do the landscaping for the park, cutting the grass, mulching, etc. And his quote had been a couple $100 cheaper than what they were paying, and that it had always bothered him because the person that did those jobs was the vice president's son, and that what they were paying him was pretty outrageous in terms of what standard. Eventually, it went to court, where the judge looked at everything and mandated that they pay $21,000. $1,000 per each homeowner, plus attorney and court fees, which were like another $2,000 for a total of $23,000 in damages. Additionally, they were fined by the city's governing body after it was reported. I don't know how much that fine was, though. We ended up selling the house that following summer, but I talked to a couple friends that still lived there about a year after it, and they said that the president and vice president both sold their houses and moved away, because they were pretty much hated by everyone in the neighborhood and that they had an informal HOA that people donated to for upkeep of the park.